He grabbed that microphone like he owned the world. "I want to say something real tonight," Marcus announced, straightening his jacket, gold watch catching every light in the ballroom. 300 guests turned their faces toward him like sunflowers chasing light. "And I want to give a special shout-out to my new mother-in-law, Clara." Smiles stretched across the room. People expected sweetness. What came next was not sweet. The woman who spent a fortune trying to look like she belongs here. Ugly loser energy doesn't wash off, no matter how much money you throw at a dress. Time stop. A fork clattered somewhere near the left side of the room. A child laughed once, not understanding. Adults didn't laugh right away. They looked at each other first. A few of Marcus's college friends started clapping slowly, like they were at a comedy club and not my daughter's wedding. His best man covered his mouth. I don't know if that was to hide a laugh or hide his discomfort. My brain registered the words, but my body didn't know what to do with them yet. Shame and shock arrived at the same time, but they didn't fight each other. They just sat down together inside my chest quietly and waited. I did not move. My hands were resting flat on the white tablecloth. I pressed them down slightly, feeling the fabric, reminding myself that I was still real, still here, still seated with my back straight and my face composed. The flowers on the centerpiece were pale yellow roses. I focused on them for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to collect myself. My emerald gown caught the chandelier light and cast tiny green shadows on my water glass. The wedding cake behind the couple was 7 tiers of white and gold, something I had chosen with the baker over 3 separate meetings. Marcus was still smiling into the microphone like he was waiting for a trophy. "I just think honesty is a gift," he continued, loosening his collar with one finger. "And my gift tonight is keeping it real. You paid for all this, Clara, but buying your way into a room doesn't mean you belong there." Some guests shifted in their seats uncomfortably. The woman seated to my left, my oldest friend Renata, placed her hand very slowly over mine. She didn't squeeze it. She just let it rest there, warm and steady, the way you hold something fragile. Across the sweetheart table, my daughter Lily had gone completely still. Lily had always been expressive. She cried at commercials. She laughed too loudly at movies. She sent voice messages instead of texts because silence felt wrong to her. But right now she looked like someone had pressed pause on everything she was. Her champagne flute sat untouched. Her eyes moved between her new husband and me with the quiet focus of someone doing arithmetic in their head. Marcus continued. He said something about hard work and self-made people. Something about how money inherited or given freely didn't count the same way. His family table was the loudest in the room. His 3 brothers laughing openly now. His father nodding with visible approval. The photographers near the cake stand had stopped taking pictures entirely. One of them lowered her camera and just watched. The DJ near the back turned down his monitor volume slightly, leaning forward in his chair. I heard none of Marcus's words clearly anymore. They blurred into sound. What I heard instead were older things. The sound of my alarm going off at 4:45 in the morning during the years I worked 2 jobs to keep Lily in a good school district. The sound of her voice on the phone the first time she told me about Marcus. She had said, "Mom, he makes me feel safe." I remembered sitting in my car in a parking lot after that call, crying a little because I was happy, and crying a little because something in her voice made me nervous in a way I couldn't name yet. I remembered the first dinner I cooked for him. How he criticized the salt level twice and then praised himself for being honest. Marcus lowered the microphone to his side and looked directly at me from across the room with a slight tilt of his chin. Like he was waiting. Some people in the crowd turned their heads toward me too, curious, maybe hoping for a reaction that would turn this into a story worth telling later. I picked up my water glass. Took one slow sip. I placed it back down without a sound. The steadiness of that small action seemed to annoy him. He lifted the microphone again. "See that right there," he said lightly. "That silence. That's what I mean. No substance. Just sitting there looking expensive." That was the moment Lily stood up. She didn't push her chair back dramatically. She rose from it the way a person rises when they have been patient long enough and patience has finally used itself up completely. The movement was controlled but final. Every conversation in the room stopped. I turned my head toward her carefully. My chest held a complicated feeling, something between fierce love and deep worry braided together. Her wedding dress caught the light as she rose, all that ivory silk and lace that had taken 4 fittings to get right. She did not look at me first. She looked at him. Marcus laughed once, short and surprised. "Lily, baby," he said into the microphone, still performing for the room. "You don't have to defend her. I'm just being honest, okay? Everyone's thinking it." My daughter took 2 slow steps away from the sweetheart table toward the center of the dance floor. The heels of her shoes clicked once against the marble, then twice, then she stopped. The room was holding its breath. Even the candles on the table seemed to stop flickering. Marcus lowered the microphone slightly. A new expression crossed his face, something less confident than what had been there a moment ago. "Come back and sit down," he said, softer now, his voice dropping the performance quality slightly. "This is our night." Lily turned to face him fully. Her posture was the posture I had seen in her once before, on the day she walked into her college interview, terrified but committed. She had called me that morning and said, "Mom, I'm scared." And I had said, scared and ready look the same from the outside. Walk in like they're the same thing. She had walked in. She had gotten accepted. Right now she looked exactly like that version of herself. "You want honesty," she said. Her voice was clear, unhurried, reaching the entire room without effort. She wasn't yelling. That made it more powerful. "Then let me be honest too." Marcus extended his free hand toward her, palm up, trying to make the gesture look easy and affectionate. She looked at his hand without taking it. She reached up instead to the delicate chain around her neck, the one he had gifted her on their 6-month anniversary, the one she had worn every day since. She unclasped it slowly. The tiny gold links caught the light as she held it out to the side and set it down on the nearest table with a soft, deliberate sound. The room responded to that sound the way rooms respond when something real happens. Collective exhale. Someone near the windows pressed their hand over their heart. One of Marcus's brothers stopped mid-laugh. Lily's maid of honor, seated at the bridal party table, put down her fork. "My mother," Lily said, her gaze returning to Marcus, "worked her hands tired so I could have everything I needed. She paid for this wedding because she loves me, not because she needed your approval." Her voice stayed even. Not cruel. Not breaking. Just honest. "And you just used her love as a punchline." Marcus's jaw tightened. He reset his expression quickly, glancing toward his family table for grounding. "Lily, you're being overly sensitive." "I was being playful. Your mom knows that." He attempted a casual laugh. It didn't land the way casual laughs are supposed to. "Stop," she said. Clean and simple. "You've said things like this before. In private. I told myself it was stress. I told myself you didn't mean it." He paused. I watched her from my seat, not moving, barely breathing. "I was wrong about that." A woman near the entrance made a sound so soft it was almost nothing. Lily turned around and looked at me. Her eyes were full and steady at the same time, like a glass filled right to the rim without spilling. I saw every age she had ever been in that look. The 5-year-old who insisted on holding my hand even when she thought she was too old for it. The 12-year-old who crawled into my bed during thunderstorms and pretended she was there to keep me company. The 20-year-old who called me from college at midnight just to talk about nothing important. She extended her hand toward me. I stood without thinking. My legs moved before my brain gave them permission. My fingers met hers and she held on firmly. Not gently, firmly, the way you hold on to something you are choosing. The hall filled with sound again. This time murmurs and gasps and one clear crying sound from somewhere I couldn't identify. We turned together toward the exit, walking slowly between the round tables decorated with roses and candles and little framed photos of Lily and Marcus that his mother had arranged as centerpiece decorations. Marcus called after her. His voice had lost its smoothness. "Lily, come on. This is embarrassing. You're embarrassing yourself." She didn't stop walking. The only person who should feel embarrassed tonight, she said without turning back, already knows who they are. Her heels and mine clicked together against the marble floor in an almost perfect rhythm as we moved through the crowd. A few guests stepped aside quietly, making space. Some of my friends from the community center were seated near the aisle tables. They didn't say anything. They didn't need to. Their eyes said enough. One of them touched my arm lightly as we passed. Just briefly, just enough. The tall double doors of the ballroom opened ahead of us and cooler air poured through. Outside in the corridor, the wedding venue's soft background music played from hidden speakers, something instrumental and cheerful that felt completely wrong for what had just happened. Lily let go of my hand and turned to face me. She looked like she had just run a great distance in her mind, tired and awake at the same time. "Mom," she said. Her voice was quieter now that we were away from the crowd. Waited. "I'm sorry," she said. "You have nothing to be sorry for," I told her. She shook her head once. "I saw things that bothered me and I didn't say anything sooner. That's on me." I looked at my daughter standing there in her wedding dress, bouquet still somehow clutched in her left hand even through everything, and I felt an ache that was not sadness exactly but something heavier and softer at the same time. The kind of feeling that only comes when love and grief share the same moment. "You said something tonight," I said softly. "You said it when it mattered." She leaned against the corridor wall. The gold trim of her dress caught the hallway lighting. From inside the ballroom, we could hear voices rising and falling, Marcus's among them, but it all sounded very far away now. A venue staff member appeared around the corner carrying a small tray. She looked at us, looked at Lily's dress, and quietly reversed direction without a word. I sat down on one of the corridor benches and Lily sat beside me, her skirt spreading wide around her. We sat in silence for a moment. Not uncomfortable silence. The kind of silence that belongs to people who know each other deeply enough that words are optional. "He said things before tonight," she admitted finally, looking at her hands. "About you. About how you spoiled me. About how your money made me soft." I nodded slowly. "I suspected," I said gently. "You never said anything. You seemed happy," I told her. "And I wasn't sure. I second-guessed myself. I thought maybe I was looking for problems because I was afraid of losing you to someone else." She turned to look at me. "You should have told me anyway." "Yes," I agreed. "I should have." Honesty between us had always been easier in small doses, in safe moments, never in the moments when it truly needed to be delivered. We had both learned something about that tonight, I thought. The corridor was quiet except for distant ballroom noise and the soft hum of the venue's air system. Lily's maid of honor, Priya, appeared in the doorway holding both their small bridal clutches. She looked between us, assessed the situation with the speed of someone who had been Lily's best friend for 11 years, and sat down on Lily's other side without being asked. She didn't say anything dramatic. She just handed Lily her bag and then looked forward. That was the right thing to do. I had always liked Priya for exactly that quality. She understood when people needed company without conversation. The three of us sat in that corridor for several minutes while the wedding reception continued inside without its bride. "You want honesty," she said. Her voice was clear, unhurried, reaching the entire room without effort. She wasn't yelling. That made it more powerful. "Then let me be honest too." Marcus extended his free hand toward her, palm up, trying to make the gesture look easy and affectionate. She looked at his hand without taking it. She reached up instead to the delicate chain around her neck, the one he had gifted her on their 6-month anniversary, the one she had worn every day since. She unclasped it slowly. The tiny gold links caught the light as she held it out to the side and set it down on the nearest table with a soft, deliberate sound. The room responded to that sound the way rooms respond when something real happens. Collective exhale. Someone near the windows pressed their hand over their heart. One of Marcus's brothers stopped mid-laugh. Lily's maid of honor, seated at the bridal party table, put down her fork. "My mother," Lily said, her gaze returning to Marcus, "worked her hands tired so I could have everything I needed. She paid for this wedding because she loves me, not because she needed your approval. Her voice stayed even. Not cruel. Not breaking. Just honest. And you just used her love as a punchline. Marcus's jaw tightened. He reset his expression quickly, glancing toward his family table for grounding. Lily, you're being overly sensitive. I was being playful. Your mom knows that. He attempted a casual laugh. It didn't land the way casual laughs are supposed to. Stop, she said. Clean and simple. You've said things like this before. In private. I told myself it was stress. I told myself you didn't mean it. He paused. I watched her from my seat, not moving, barely breathing. I was wrong about that. A woman near the entrance made a sound so soft it was almost nothing. Lily turned around and looked at me. Her eyes were full and steady at the same time, like a glass filled right to the rim without spilling. I saw every age she had ever been in that look. The 5-year-old who insisted on holding my hand even when she thought she was too old for it. The 12-year-old who crawled into my bed during thunderstorms and pretended she was there to keep me company. The 20-year-old who called me from college at midnight just to talk about nothing important. She extended her hand toward me. I stood without thinking. My legs moved before my brain gave them permission. My fingers met hers and she held on firmly. Not gently, firmly, the way you hold on to something you are choosing. The hall filled with sound again. This time murmurs and gasps and one clear crying sound from somewhere I couldn't identify. We turned together toward the exit, walking slowly between the round tables decorated with roses and candles and little framed photos of Lily and Marcus that his mother had arranged as centerpiece decorations. Marcus called after her. His voice had lost its smoothness. Lily, come on. This is embarrassing. You're embarrassing yourself. She didn't stop walking. The only person who should feel embarrassed tonight, she said without turning back, already knows who they are. Her heels and mine clicked together against the marble floor in an almost perfect rhythm as we moved through the crowd. A few guests stepped aside quietly, making space. Some of my friends from the community center were seated near the aisle tables. They didn't say anything. They didn't need to. Their eyes said enough. One of them touched my arm lightly as we passed. Just briefly, just enough. The tall double doors of the ballroom opened ahead of us and cooler air poured through. Outside in the corridor, the wedding venue's soft background music played from hidden speakers, something instrumental and cheerful that felt completely wrong for what had just happened. Lily let go of my hand and turned to face me. She looked like she had just run a great distance in her mind, tired and awake at the same time. Mom, she said. Her voice was quieter now that we were away from the crowd. Waited. I'm sorry, she said. You have nothing to be sorry for, I told her. She shook her head once. I saw things that bothered me and I didn't say anything sooner. That's on me. I looked at my daughter standing there in her wedding dress, bouquet still somehow clutched in her left hand even through everything, and I felt an ache that was not sadness exactly but something heavier and softer at the same time. The kind of feeling that only comes when love and grief share the same moment. You said something tonight, I said softly. You said it when it mattered. She leaned against the corridor wall. The gold trim of her dress caught the hallway lighting. From inside the ballroom, we could hear voices rising and falling, Marcus's among them, but it all sounded very far away now. A venue staff member appeared around the corner carrying a small tray. She looked at us, looked at Lily's dress, and quietly reversed direction without a word. I sat down on one of the corridor benches and Lily sat beside me, her skirt spreading wide around her. We sat in silence for a moment. Not uncomfortable silence. The kind of silence that belongs to people who know each other deeply enough that words are optional. He said things before tonight, she admitted finally, looking at her hands. About you. About how you spoiled me. About how your money made me soft. I nodded slowly. I suspected, I said gently. You never said anything. You seemed happy, I told her. And I wasn't sure. I second-guessed myself. I thought maybe I was looking for problems because I was afraid of losing you to someone else. She turned to look at me. You should have told me anyway. Yes, I agreed. I should have. Honesty between us had always been easier in small doses, in safe moments, never in the moments when it truly needed to be delivered. We had both learned something about that tonight, I thought. The corridor was quiet except for distant ballroom noise and the soft hum of the venue's air system. Lily's maid of honor, Priya, appeared in the doorway holding both their small bridal clutches. She looked between us, assessed the situation with the speed of someone who had been Lily's best friend for 11 years, and sat down on Lily's other side without being asked. She didn't say anything dramatic. She just handed Lily her bag and then looked forward. That was the right thing to do. I had always liked Priya for exactly that quality. She understood when people needed company without conversation. The three of us sat in that corridor for several minutes while the wedding reception continued inside without its bride. Eventually Lily said, "I don't want to go back in there." "You don't have to," I told her. "What do I do?" she asked. And this time the question was directed at the ceiling more than at me, more at the general universe than at any one person. "Right now you don't have to do anything," Priya said quietly. "Right now you just have to breathe." Lily exhaled slowly. I reached into my small evening bag, found the packet of tissues I always carried, and held it out. She took 2 without comment. The familiar routine of the gesture, mother offering tissues, daughter accepting them, carried a strange comfort all its own. Inside the ballroom, someone had restarted the music. We could hear the bass notes through the walls. Marcus's family was apparently not leaving. A few minutes later, Marcus himself appeared in the corridor doorway. He had taken off his jacket. His expression had reorganized itself into something that was trying to look calm and reasonable. "Lily," he said, "can we talk privately?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Everything you want to say, you can say with my mother and Priya here." He glanced at me. Something in his expression tightened. "Clara, I owe you an apology," he said, in a voice that was technically making the right sounds. "I said something inappropriate. I was nervous tonight and my humor went the wrong direction." The apology was constructed correctly, like a piece of furniture assembled from a manual. All the right pieces in the right order. But furniture assembled from a manual doesn't have history in it, doesn't have the weight of actually feeling something. I studied his face carefully. "I appreciate you saying that," I said, which was true. I did appreciate the effort. Whether I believed the feeling behind it was a separate matter. Lily said nothing. She was watching him with the same arithmetic expression as before, calculating, measuring. "Baby," he said, moving closer, softening his voice. "Everyone inside is asking for you. It's our wedding night. We can talk about all of this tomorrow. Let's not let this ruin the whole evening." The word ruin landed with a small thud. Lily tilted her head. "You humiliated my mother in front of 300 people," she said steadily. "And your solution is to ask me not to let it ruin the evening." He blinked. "I said I was sorry." "You said it was your humor going the wrong direction," she replied. "That's an explanation. It's not the same as sorry." Priya looked down at her shoes. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. His confidence had been draining steadily since the corridor. Without the microphone and the audience and his family's laughter, the performance had nothing to perform to. "What do you want me to do, Lily?" he asked. "What would make this right for you?" She thought about that question for a genuine moment. I watched her think about it. "I want to understand why you said it," she said finally. "Not what you were feeling in the moment. I mean the real reason. Because that wasn't the first time you talked about my mother that way. It was just the first time you did it out loud." Marcus was quiet. Not the thoughtful kind of quiet. The kind that comes when someone is trying to find a way around a question instead of through it. I had seen that quality before in people. The sideways glance, the slight jaw shift, the way the eyes move when the brain is looking for exits instead of answers. "She makes you dependent," he said finally. "That's what I think. I think she kept you close on purpose so you'd always need her. And I think that's not healthy." Lily looked at him for a long time. The music inside had changed to something slower now. You think my mother loving me is a manipulation, Lily said slowly. Not love, he said carefully. Investment. Everything she does comes with an expectation attached. That's not true, I said. Not hotly, just clearly. He looked at me. For the first time he seemed uncertain about whether he was in an argument he could win. She paid for our wedding, he said. That's not nothing. That comes with strings. I paid for the wedding because Lily is my daughter, I said. There were no strings. There was no expectation. There was just a mother who wanted her daughter's wedding to be beautiful. People don't spend that kind of money without wanting something, he said. And in saying it, he revealed exactly how he experienced generosity. As transaction. As leverage. I didn't answer that. The silence I left around his statement was more honest than any argument would have been. Lily stood up from the bench. She smoothed her dress with both hands, a small automatic gesture. She looked at Marcus with eyes that had finished calculating and arrived at a result. I think I need tonight to think, she said. By myself. Not here. Marcus straightened. Lily, you can't just leave your own reception. I can, she said simply. Priya stood up too, quietly, still holding both their bags. Marcus looked between them, his expression moving through frustration and then something that looked like the beginning of genuine fear. Not the sharp fear of a moment, but the slow fear of someone watching something important becoming unreachable. If you walk out of there tonight, he said carefully, you're making a statement you can't take back. I know, she replied. She looked at me. Can I stay with you tonight, Mom? The question was simple and ancient, the same question she had asked me during every hard night of her childhood. Of course, I said. We walked toward the venue exit together, Lily and Priya and I, while Marcus stood in the corridor watching us go. He didn't follow. The night air outside was cool and clear and smelled faintly of the garden along the venue's outer wall. Lily stopped on the top step and breathed it in with her eyes closed. Priya ordered a car on her phone. I stood beside my daughter and looked out at the parking lot full of guests' vehicles, the string lights the venue had hung along the entrance path, all that beautiful decoration sitting perfectly in place for an evening that had gone somewhere entirely unexpected. I planned this wedding for 9 months, Lily said quietly, not to anyone in particular. I know, I said. All of it felt like building toward something real, she continued. I kept thinking once we're married, things will settle. He'll relax. I'll stop feeling like I have to manage his moods so carefully. She opened her eyes and looked at the string lights. That's not how it works, is it? No, I said gently. That's not how it works. She nodded once like she had already known that and was just confirming it. Priya's phone buzzed. Car's 3 minutes out, she said. We rode back to my house in the quiet of a late evening, the city lights moving past the car windows in long slow streaks. Lily had her head against the window, still in her wedding dress, still somehow holding her small bouquet of cream-colored peonies. She hadn't said a word since the venue. I didn't push for conversation. Sometimes silence after a hard thing is not emptiness. It's the mind doing necessary work. When we arrived at my house, I unlocked the front door and turned on the hallway light. The familiar smell of home, cedar and old books and the candle I burned most evenings met us at the door. Lily walked inside and stopped in the middle of the hallway, looking around the way people look at places that carry their history. The framed school photos along the wall. The wooden bench by the door where she used to drop her backpack every afternoon as a child. This place never changes, she said. I change it sometimes, I said. She smiled just slightly. Not really. I went to the kitchen to make tea. It was almost 11 at night and neither of us needed caffeine, but the ritual of tea at the end of hard moments was something we had practiced together since she was small. The kettle hummed. Priya had gone home after making sure we were settled. Lily came into the kitchen and sat at the island. Her wedding dress spread across the stool in a wide white cloud. She laid her head down on her folded arms. I set a mug in front of her without speaking. After a moment she raised her head and wrapped both hands around the warm ceramic. I don't know what I'm doing, she said. Most people don't, I replied. At first. She looked at me over the rim of her mug. Were you scared when you left Dad? I set my own mug down. This was a question she had never asked so directly. Every day, I said. For months. But you did it anyway, she said. But I did it anyway, I confirmed. She nodded slowly. I had left her father when Lily was 7 years old. It had not been a dramatic leaving. There was no single night, no microphone moment. It had been a quiet, exhausted decision made over many months, until one morning I packed 2 bags and carried them to my car with the same calm I now recognized in my own daughter's eyes tonight. How did you know it was really time? She asked. When I noticed, I felt relief at the thought of it. I told her. Not sadness. Relief. She turned that over in her mind. The kitchen clock ticked softly. I felt relieved when I took that necklace off, she said. Her voice was soft with the weight of recognizing something. Not sad. Just relieved. I looked at my daughter sitting in her wedding gown at my kitchen island, drinking chamomile tea at 11 on what was supposed to be the most celebratory night of her life, and I did not think about what had been lost. I thought about what was becoming possible. What happens tomorrow? She asked. Tomorrow you don't have to decide everything, I said. Tomorrow you just have to get through tomorrow. She finished her tea. I showed her to her old room, where nothing had changed since she moved out 3 years ago. The same pale blue walls. The same quilt with the sunflower pattern she had picked at age 13. The same small bookshelf with its mix of young adult novels and textbooks, and one ceramic frog she had painted at a craft night when she was 10 and somehow never threw away. She sat on the edge of the bed still in her wedding dress because neither of us had thought about the logistics of getting out of it. We looked at each other and both started laughing at the same moment. It was a real laugh, surprised and genuine. Not the performance of laughter but the actual thing. The kind that comes when life catches you completely unprepared with its absurdity. I found a pair of scissors and we carefully cut the back lace so she could step out of the dress without tearing the whole thing. We hung it over the closet door. Lily changed into an old college sweatshirt she found in the dresser. We said goodnight. I closed her door softly. I went to my own room and sat on the edge of my bed in the quiet. The evening settled around me. I thought about the ballroom. 300 people, candles and roses, 7 tiers of white and gold cake. All those photographs Marcus's mother had framed. I thought about the moment Marcus said what he said. I had sat very still and focused on yellow roses and not lost myself to reaction. People who watched that moment from the outside had no way of knowing what that stillness cost, or what it protected. It had not been the stillness of defeat. It was the stillness of someone who understood that this particular moment was not the one to spend her voice on. I thought about the investments I had made in Marcus's new business venture, a tech consulting firm he had launched 6 months after proposing to Lily. He had presented me a business plan over dinner. He had used words like partnership and family and building something together. I had listened carefully. I had asked questions. I had written a check for $300,000 because Lily loved him and I loved Lily. Now I sat in my quiet room thinking about that check and what it had been attached to. My phone had been lighting up with messages since we left the venue. I had turned the screen face down when we arrived home. Now I picked it up and looked. The messages were of 2 kinds. There were people who were there and wanted to check on me, genuine caring people whose words were warm. And there were people who had heard about it secondhand already, because events travel fast in the community we both lived in, and their messages mixed concern with the barely disguised excitement of people who enjoyed a story. I answered the first kind. I left the second kind for later, possibly forever. My sister Nina had called twice. I called her back. She answered on the first ring. "Are you okay?" were her first words. "I'm fine," I said. "Lily is here." "Good," Nina said. Then, "I want to drive over." "Not tonight," I told her. "Tomorrow." She was quiet for a moment. "You know everyone's talking." "I assumed," I said. "Does it bother you?" she asked carefully. I thought about it honestly. "Less than I expected," I admitted. He called you ugly in front of your guests, Clara. That's not nothing. No, I agreed. But what Lily did is also not nothing. Nina was quiet on the line. I could hear the TV in her background, her husband's nighttime routine. She walked out, I said. I know. Priya texted me. She was calm, I said. She wasn't performing. She wasn't trying to make a scene. She just made a decision. That's your daughter, Nina said softly. That's who raised her. I didn't respond to that directly. But the words settled into me warmly anyway. We talked for a few more minutes about nothing important, the kind of conversation that isn't really about its subject matter but about maintaining connection. Before we hung up, Nina said, "Try to sleep." I didn't sleep immediately. I lay in the dark thinking about the $300,000 and about Victor's speech and about a morning 14 years ago when Lily had come home from school crying because a boy in her class had told her her clothes were wrong. I had sat with her at this same kitchen table and said, people who comment on appearances are usually trying to manage their own insecurity. She had wiped her nose and said, but it still hurt. And I had said, it will keep hurting for a little while. But the hurt will shrink faster than you think. I wondered if she remembered that conversation. I fell asleep somewhere near 2 in the morning. When I woke, the house was still quiet and the morning light was coming through a gap in the curtains in that particular pale gold way that only happens early. I lay still for a moment listening. From down the hall I could hear Lily moving quietly, the soft sound of her door opening, the familiar creak of the third floorboard outside her room that she had never quite learned to step around. She appeared in my doorway a few minutes later with 2 cups of coffee, still wearing the old college sweatshirt, hair uneven from sleep. She set 1 cup on my nightstand and curled into the chair in the corner of my room with hers, tucking her feet under her. We sat in morning silence for a while drinking our coffee. He texted, she said eventually. Waited. 14 times, she added. Did you read them? Some of them, she said. He says he's sorry. He says I humiliated him by leaving. He says if I had just talked to him privately, everything would have been fine. She sipped her coffee. In that order, she added. I thought about what to say. I chose not to say much. What do you think? She asked. I think an apology that also assigns blame for your reaction is not quite a full apology, I said carefully. She nodded, looking into her mug. That's what I thought too. Outside my window, a bird was repeating the same 4-note call over and over, very certain of itself. Mom, she said. The business money. What you gave Marcus for the firm. I felt my chest tighten slightly but kept my face even. What about it? Did you give it because you trusted him, she asked. Or because you trusted me trusting him? That was a precise question. It required a precise answer. Both, I said honestly. Mostly the second one. She absorbed that. I'm sorry, she said quietly. You don't need to apologize for that, I said. It was my decision. I should have seen things more clearly, she said. Maybe, I replied. But you were inside it. That makes it harder to see the edges of something. She unfolded herself from the chair and came to sit at the foot of my bed, the way she used to when she was young and woke from bad dreams. What are you going to do about the money? She asked. I'm going to speak with my attorney, I said. The investment was structured with certain conditions. Some of them may apply now. She looked at me. You thought about this possibility. I hoped I wouldn't need to think about it, I corrected. But yes. She was quiet for a moment. You protected yourself. I try to protect the people I care about, I said gently. Including myself. That took me a long time to learn. She tilted her head slightly. There was something working in her expression, something arriving at understanding. The conditions in the investment contract, she said. What were they? Among other things, I said carefully. The investment was tied to the stability of the family partnership, as he chose to define it in his proposal. He actually used that language himself, the stability of our family partnership, as part of his pitch for why the money was sound. I watched her connect the pieces. So if the family partnership dissolves, she said slowly, then the terms revert, I confirmed. She was quiet. A complicated expression moved across her face. Not satisfaction. More like witnessing cause and effect in operation. You didn't plan that as a trap, she said. No, I agreed. He wrote the terms himself. We sat together in the morning light for a while longer. Eventually Lily showered and I made breakfast, and the house filled with the ordinary sounds of a morning, water running and eggs in a pan and the coffee maker cycling. It almost felt normal, and normal had never felt more precious. My attorney Dara called at 9. I had messaged her the night before with a brief summary. She was efficient and direct, the qualities I valued most in a professional context. I've reviewed the agreement, she said. You have options. Good ones. Can we meet this week? Yes. Tuesday, she said. My office at 10. We confirmed the time and ended the call. Lily was seated at the kitchen island watching me. Business? She asked. Tuesday, I said. Good, she replied simply. We ate breakfast and talked about small things, not the wedding, not Marcus, not the money, just small ordinary things. Her job. A book she had been reading. A restaurant she had wanted to try that we agreed to visit together. Life continuing its shape around the large irregular thing that had happened. Around 11, Marcus arrived at my front door. I saw his car from the window before he rang the bell. I went to the door. Lily appeared at the end of the hallway. I looked at her and raised my eyebrow. She gave a small nod. Opened the door. Marcus was wearing a plain jacket and no expression I could read clearly. He looked like someone who had rehearsed what he was going to say and then forgot it in the car. Good morning, Clara, he said. Good morning, I replied. I'd like to speak with Lily, he said. I stepped back from the door. He came inside. The three of us sat in the living room, which had the formal quality of a room only used for important things. Lily sat across from him. I sat nearby, close enough to be present, far enough to give them room. Marcus looked at his hands for a moment. Then he looked at Lily. I was out of line last night, he said. Badly. I knew what I was saying and I said it anyway, and that's worse than if I had been drunk or not thinking. I was thinking. I meant to say it. Lily looked at him. Thank you for telling me that, she said. I think I resented her, he said, meaning me but not quite able to use my name. I think I thought that if I could diminish her somehow, I would feel like I had earned you instead of been outspent. The words were unusually honest. More honest than I expected. I respected that even with everything else. Lily didn't respond immediately. She sat with what he said for a moment, treating it with the seriousness it had taken him effort to produce. I know, she said finally. I think I knew that. And I kept thinking if I loved you enough, you would stop needing to compete with her. He looked down. That wasn't fair to you, he said. No, she agreed. It wasn't. There was a long silence. The bird outside my window was still at its 4-note call. What happens now? He asked. I don't know yet, she said honestly. I need time to think. Actual time, not a few days. Real time. He nodded. He looked as though he wanted to say something else but had the sense not to. I'm not going to fight the contract terms, he said, looking at me directly for the first time since sitting down. With the investment. Whatever the agreement says, I'll honor it. I looked at him steadily. I appreciate that, I said. He stood up. He looked at Lily once more with an expression that was tired and real in a way his wedding speech had not been. I'm sorry, Lily. I mean it this time without the other things attached. She met his eyes. I believe you, she said. He left. The door closed softly. Lily and I sat in the living room for a moment without speaking. The formal room felt less formal now, like it had served its purpose and could relax. What do you think? I asked her finally. I think he meant it, she said. And I think it's too late anyway. The days that followed had a strange, gentle quality to them. Lily stayed with me for a week. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because we both understood that the familiarity of shared space was useful after an upheaval. She worked from my dining room table on her laptop during the day. I worked from my home office. In the evenings we cooked dinner together or ordered food and watched old films she remembered from childhood. It was not the life she had been planning a week ago, but it had its own texture, its own unexpected rightness.
People called. Some with genuine concern. Some with thinly disguised curiosity. Some with advice I had not asked for. A woman from my neighborhood association called 3 times in 2 days to ask what had happened, and each time I told her warmly and briefly that things were fine and that I appreciated her thinking of me, and each time she seemed disappointed by the lack of drama. I understood. A wedding scandal in a close community was genuinely interesting. I was simply not interested in being interesting in that particular way. My attorney meeting on Tuesday was productive. The terms of the investment agreement were clear. The instability created by the events of the wedding weekend created a contractual basis for renegotiation. Marcus had already communicated through his own attorney that he would not contest the terms. The $300,000 would be returned in installments over 18 months. Dara handed me the amended agreement. I signed it. She looked at me across her desk and said, "You handled all of this with remarkable composure." I had good reason to, I said. I thanked her and left. Lily was waiting outside in the car. She had driven me, a detail that meant more than it might have looked like from the outside. A month ago, she would have worried about being seen taking sides. Now she sat in my passenger seat without any visible conflict about it. "Good?" she asked when I got in. "Good," I confirmed. She started the car. We drove through the city in the easy silence that had become our default mode that week. At a traffic light, she said, "I have an appointment on Thursday. A therapist." "Good," I said, the same way she had said it. She had found the therapist herself, mentioned it casually over dinner 2 nights before. I had not suggested it. She had arrived at it on her own, which was the only way it would ever actually work. We went to the restaurant we had agreed on at breakfast the morning after the wedding. It was a small Italian place she had noticed months ago and kept saying she'd try soon. We ordered too much food and ate most of it and sat over empty plates talking for 2 hours about things that had nothing to do with weddings or investments or community gossip. Gradually, life began finding its new shape. Lily moved back into her own apartment. She and Marcus were living separately during what they were both calling a pause, which was a careful word that gave them both room without demanding a permanent decision. I did not advise her either direction. She was an adult who had spent the past week demonstrating that her judgment, when not compromised by the wishful thinking love sometimes requires, was sound. My job was to be available, not to steer. I had learned the hard way that steering could look like love and still cause harm. About 3 weeks after the wedding, I was asked to speak at a local women's business association luncheon. I had been invited months before, when the world still looked different. The topic they had assigned me was resilience in entrepreneurship. I called the organizer and asked if I could adjust the topic slightly. She said yes. I spent an evening writing notes, not a speech exactly, more a series of honest observations I wanted to share. I did not plan to discuss the wedding explicitly. The story was already too public to need my amplification. But I wanted to say something true about silence, about the ways people misread stillness, about what it cost to hold composure in a moment of public humiliation and why that cost was worth it, about the difference between absorbing an insult and surrendering to it. I read my notes 3 times. I made small edits. The morning of the luncheon, Lily called to wish me well. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "A little," I admitted. "Good," she said. "That means it matters." I laughed at that. It was something I had said to her before her first real job interview. She had remembered it. She was using it now. The luncheon was in a hotel conference room with round tables and flower arrangements and about 60 women in professional attire. I had attended this event before as a guest. Being at the front of the room changed the texture of it. I could see faces more clearly from up there. I could see who was paying attention and who was pretending. When I began speaking, I started with the smallest possible story. I told them about the yellow roses on the table at my daughter's wedding. I described focusing on them for 3 seconds during a hard moment. 3 seconds sounds small, I said. But in a crisis, 3 seconds of self-possession can determine whether you respond or just react. I chose yellow roses because they were there. You can choose anything. The point is the choosing. Several women leaned forward. I continued. I spoke about the long, quiet years of building something, about how public moments are not the real test, about how the real tests happen in private, and the public moments are only where the results of those private tests become visible. I did not say Marcus's name. I did not use the word wedding. But everyone in the room knew what I was drawing from. They always know. That's the nature of a story that travels. But knowing and being told are different experiences. By not naming it directly, I gave them something more useful than gossip. I gave them the mechanism. How to sit still when you want to shout. How to choose water instead of weapons. How to let someone else's ugly moment become the foundation of your next clear step. When I finished, the applause was long enough to feel genuine. Afterward, several women waited to speak with me privately. One of them was a young woman, maybe 26, with the tight, careful expression of someone managing something privately that she hadn't yet found words for. She thanked me for speaking. She said something about how she had been in a situation where someone had spoken about her that way in front of people, and she didn't know how to hold herself together. I listened carefully. I asked if she wanted to talk more. She said yes. We found 2 chairs off to the side of the room and sat together for 20 minutes. I gave her my card at the end. She emailed me the next day. Her name was Joanna. She had been in a relationship with someone who used public settings to diminish her, counting on the audience to suppress her response. She had eventually left but was still working through why she had stayed as long as she did. We exchanged a few messages. I connected her with a community group I knew that offered support for exactly her kind of experience. She wrote back 3 days later and said, "Finding the right room matters more than I realized." I kept that message. I added it to a small folder I had started keeping. The folder grew. Messages from women who had attended the luncheon or heard about it secondhand. Messages from people who had been at the wedding and wanted to say something privately that they hadn't said in public. Messages from strangers who had seen a short clip someone had apparently taken of Lily and me walking out of the ballroom and shared it without our permission. I was not thrilled about the clip, but I was moved by what people were expressing when they saw it. Again and again, women wrote to say, "That is what it looks like when you choose yourself." Lily saw the clip too. She called me when she found it. "How do you feel about it?" I asked. She thought for a moment. "I feel okay about it," she said. "We weren't doing anything wrong. We were just leaving." She paused. "I think some people needed to see that it was possible to just leave." I thought about that. She was right. The clip wasn't about drama. It was about possibility. It was a record of someone deciding, in real time, in front of 300 people, that love did not require tolerating contempt. That was not nothing. Lily's therapy was going well. She didn't tell me everything about it, which was appropriate, but she mentioned occasionally that things were clearer, that she was understanding patterns she hadn't seen before. She was reading more. She went for long walks in the morning. She called me more often, shorter calls, but more of them, lighter conversations that were about being in contact rather than solving anything. She seemed, slowly, to be settling into herself in a new way. Not repaired exactly. Growing into something she hadn't quite been before. Marcus had not contacted me since the morning he came to the house. I did not expect him to and did not want him to. The 18-month repayment schedule was being honored, first installment received on time. My attorney handled all the correspondence. Whatever grief or complexity existed between him and Lily was theirs to navigate. My part in it had been what it was. I was not invested in his outcome either positively or negatively. That neutrality was hard won, and I intended to keep it. Late one afternoon in the 5th week after the wedding, I was working in my home office when Lily called. "Can I come over?" she asked. "Of course," I said. She arrived an hour later with a folder tucked under her arm and the energetic walk she got when she was working toward something. She sat down across from my desk and opened the folder. Inside were several pages of notes, handwritten on legal paper in her compact, precise script. "I want to tell you about an idea," she said. I closed my laptop and gave her my full attention. She had been in contact with Joanna, the young woman from the luncheon who had emailed me. Through that connection, she had started talking to others. She had begun mapping a specific gap in support services available to women navigating the financial and legal complications of leaving relationships in which money had been used as control. Not just physical or emotional abuse, financial coercion, the kind that trapped people in situations long after they understood they needed to leave. There's nowhere they can go, Lily said. That handles the whole picture. She laid out the pages on my desk. She had outlined a small organization, something modest to start, a resource hub, legal consultation access, emergency financial guidance, connections to housing and employment services. She had already spoken to 2 attorneys who were interested in donating pro bono time. She had a name for it, a small name, quiet and functional. She had drawn the logo herself in the corner of one page, simple and clean. I looked at everything she had assembled. The folder, the notes, the name, the logo, the quiet competence of someone who had done real work before bringing it forward. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Advice," she said. "And maybe some connections. I know you know people who work in this space." "I do," I said. "And the rest? I want to build it myself," she said. "With my own time and my own effort. I don't want it funded by the wedding money." I understood what she meant. She was drawing a clean line, not rejecting my help, just specifying that this particular thing needed to come from her own hands. "I'll introduce you," I said, "and I'll give advice whenever you want it. The building is yours." She nodded. Her face had the focused calm of someone who had found the next right thing to do. We spent 2 hours going through her notes together. I asked questions. She answered most of them with material she already had. The few gaps she noted for follow-up research. By the time she left, the folder had twice as many annotations as it had arrived with. At the door, she turned back and said, "You know why I'm doing this, right?" "Tell me," I said. "Because you sat still at that table," she said. "And because I watched you do it. And because I understood that you weren't being quiet because you were weak." I held that for a moment. "I understood," she continued, "that you were being quiet because you already knew something. And watching you know it without saying it, it changed what I understood about what I was doing with my life." She left. I stood in my doorway until her car turned the corner. The evening was cooling off. Birds in the trees along my street were doing their end-of-day routines. I went back inside and sat for a while in the quiet of my house, thinking about yellow roses and 3 seconds and the long invisible architecture of the choices we build our lives from. The foundation, as Lily called it informally even though it wasn't officially formed yet, began to take shape quietly over the following weeks. Lily met with attorneys, community workers, and 2 women from a local crisis support network who immediately understood what she was building and why. She kept me updated, but didn't ask for intervention. I watched from the useful distance of someone available, but not hovering. Joanna joined as the first volunteer coordinator. She brought 3 others within 2 weeks. The quiet efficiency of it reminded me of how good work usually starts, without announcements, just people doing the next necessary thing. I was approached by a journalist around this time. She worked for a regional magazine that covered business and community stories. She had heard about the wedding, the clip, the luncheon speech, the investment situation. She framed her inquiry carefully, describing the piece as a profile on resilience and community impact rather than a wedding drama story. I appreciated the framing. I asked her to send me her previous work. She did. The work was careful and respectful. I agreed to speak with her. We met at a coffee shop near my office. She was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with a direct way of asking questions that I respected. She did not start with the wedding. She started with my background, how I had built my consulting firm, what I had learned about leadership in the early years, what failure had taught me. We talked for 90 minutes before the wedding came up. When it did, she asked simply, "What do you want people to understand about that night?" I thought about it carefully. "That stillness and defeat look identical from across a room," I said. "And they are completely different things." The article came out 3 weeks later. It was fair and careful. It included a brief description of what Lily was building. Several people who read it reached out to Lily directly with offers of support, connections, small donations toward eventual formalization. The thing was growing, finding its own momentum. I watched it with the specific satisfaction of someone who has offered soil and sunlight without directing the growth. There is a particular joy in that. I had not fully understood it until now. One morning I was cleaning out a drawer in my home office, and I found an old birthday card from Lily. She had made it herself when she was 8. On the front she had drawn what was apparently meant to be a portrait of me, which featured round blue eyes and very large hands and a smile that took up most of my face. Inside she had written in careful child handwriting, "You are my person and I am your person, and that is enough forever." I sat at my desk with the card for a long time. I thought about what enough meant to an 8-year-old. The pure, uncomplicated arithmetic of it. I thought about how that simplicity gets complicated by the time we reach adulthood. We add conditions and fears and the weight of other people's opinions about what love is supposed to look like. We start to believe that love needs constant demonstration, constant proof, constant public confirmation. We forget that sometimes the realest thing is just what the 8-year-old already knew. You are my person and I am your person. I put the card on my desk where I could see it. It felt like the right place for it. Lily called that afternoon. Not about the organization.
Just to talk.
She had been on a walk and seen a dog that reminded her of the stuffed animal she had carried everywhere at age 4, a brown spaniel she had named Mr. Bread for reasons neither of us had ever been able to reconstruct. She called to tell me about the dog. I laughed. We talked for 20 minutes about Mr. Bread and the summer she lost him at a grocery store and the emergency replacement my sister Nina found that was slightly the wrong shade of brown and that Lily had accepted with diplomatic grace. These were the conversations I had missed during the years she was focused on building her life with Marcus. The light, quick ones. The calls with no agenda. There had been fewer of them than I had noticed losing until they started coming back. Love makes space for the small things when the large things aren't crowding them out. I filed that observation away alongside others I had been collecting without meaning to, a slow private education in what matters and what we let replace it without quite realizing the replacement is happening. 2 months after the wedding, Lily officially registered the organization. She texted me a photo of the paperwork. The name looked clean and real in the official type of the registration document. I stared at the photo for a long while. I thought about her at 22, uncertain and bright, starting her career in human resources, telling me she wanted to work somewhere she could actually help people. She had found, in a roundabout way that no one would have planned, exactly that. Some paths require you to walk through the wrong door first to find the right room. The first real event the organization held was small. A Saturday afternoon workshop on financial documentation and legal rights for anyone navigating a separation. Lily led it with Joanna and one of the pro bono attorneys. 12 people attended. Lily called me that evening, her voice carrying the particular tired energy of someone who has done something genuinely difficult and meaningful in the same afternoon. "How is it?" I asked.
Hard, she said.
Good hard. The stories people carry. Mom, the things people carry. I understood what she meant. I had been learning about those stories for months. You did something real today, I said. We did something real today, she corrected. You and I, she continued, and the wedding night and the necklace and all of it, that's what's behind the room we opened today. I want you to know that. I was quiet for a moment. Thank you for saying that, I said softly. She said good night. I sat in my kitchen in the dark for a little while, holding my phone, feeling the comfortable weight of having been part of something that had started from hurt and grown towards something entirely different. The workshops continued monthly. Attendance grew slowly, but consistently. Word traveled through the specific networks that carry this kind of information, through quiet referrals from social workers, through word of mouth among people who knew someone who knew someone who needed exactly this. The organization stayed small on purpose. Lily was not trying to scale fast. She was trying to build something trustworthy. Trust takes time. She understood that. I had watched her grow into that understanding in real time, and it was one of the most impressive things I had ever seen. 6 months after the wedding, I ran into someone from the event. Not Marcus, not his family, but a woman who had been seated at a table near the back. A colleague of Marcus's sister, someone I had met briefly at an engagement party the previous year. We were at the same hardware store. She recognized me first. She said my name with a slight caution of someone unsure whether to acknowledge the shared history. I smiled and said hello. She relaxed. We stood in the paint aisle and talked for a few minutes about nothing weighted. Before she left, she said simply, "What your daughter did was really something." "Yes," I said. "It was." I finished my errands and drove home with the car windows down. The city looked ordinary and clean in the late afternoon light. I thought about all the people in all the cars around me carrying all their private, complicated stories, the weddings gone wrong and the corrections made, and the slow work of rebuilding direction after a deviation. We moved through each other's periphery without knowing any of it. Each car a whole long story, traveling at the speed of traffic. I found that thought companionable rather than lonely. Lily and Marcus finalized their separation legally 3 months after the wedding. It was handled by attorneys and was not contentious. She told me the morning it was complete. Her voice was measured, a little tired, but not broken. "How are you?" I asked. "Okay," she said. "Actually okay, not performing okay." "I know the difference," I told her. "I know you do," she replied. We made plans to have dinner that Friday. She suggested a new place, somewhere neither of us had been, starting fresh in small ways.
We were good at that now.
The Friday dinner was long and good. We shared several dishes and argued pleasantly about whether the appetizers were better than the mains and concluded that they were roughly equal and that this was a mark of a genuinely good kitchen. We talked about Lily's work, the day job she had kept through everything, the organization, a trip she was thinking of taking to visit a friend in another city. We talked about a novel I had recently read and recommended. We agreed on most of it and disagreed productively on the ending, which was my favorite kind of literary conversation.
Walking to our cars afterward, Lily linked her arm through mine the way she had done when she was a teenager and was cold or tired or both. The evening was pleasant, the street outside the restaurant busy with other Friday diners. "Do you think I'll get it right next time?" she asked. It was the kind of question that sounds casual and isn't. "I think you know yourself much better now than you did before," I said carefully. "That gives you better material to work with." She considered that. "That's a very diplomatic answer," she said. "It's also completely true," I replied. She laughed. Winter arrived, which in our city meant cooler temperatures and shorter days and the particular indoor light of early evenings. Lily's organization had a name now printed on proper materials, a small website Joanna had built, and a growing roster of volunteers. Lily had been approached by 2 regional newspapers about covering the work being done. She was thoughtful about media, careful about which stories to let in and how much detail to share. I respected her instincts on this. Privacy was part of what made the space safe for the people using it. I was wrapping up a significant consulting project in November, the kind that required the full concentrated effort of several months. When it concluded, I found myself with more open time than I had in years. Open time requires intention or it becomes idle time, which is not the same thing. I made a list, not of obligations but of things I had been putting off for years that I genuinely wanted to do. A painting class I had found and not registered for. A novel I had been meaning to write the outline of for 10 years. A long trip to a place that had been on my list since before Lily was born. I registered for the painting class first. It met on Tuesday evenings in a studio above a bookshop in an older part of the city. The instructor was patient and specific. The other students were at various levels, mostly beginners like me. I had not made anything with my hands in a very long time, and the experience of concentrating on a canvas instead of a screen or a spreadsheet had an immediate quieting effect on a part of my mind that was usually in motion. I went home from the first class with paint on my sleeve and a small landscape that looked earnest if not technically accomplished. Lily came over the following weekend and found the painting propped on my kitchen counter. She looked at it for a long time. "You painted this?" she asked. "I did," I confirmed. "Mom," she said, "this is really sweet." Sweet was not the same as good, which she knew and I knew, and the diplomatic precision of the word was funny enough that we both started laughing again. I put the painting in the hallway. It looked appropriate there, a little clumsy and completely genuine. Two things that often belong together. Lily said she was proud of me for trying something new. I said the same thing back to her. In early December, Lily hosted the first annual gathering of the organization's volunteers and partner organizations. She held it in a rented community space. Nothing elaborate, folding tables and good food and an informal program. She asked me to say a few words. Kept it short. I talked about the distance between being hurt and becoming useful, how that distance can be traveled, how it requires more patience than most people expect and more support than most people ask for. I talked about the yellow roses again. I was becoming fond of that detail. It was small and honest and held the whole story. Afterward, people gathered in small groups with the easy warmth of people who share a purpose. I moved through the room slowly, listening more than speaking. A woman named Constance who volunteered as a legal guide told me about 3 cases she had helped with that quarter. The details were private, but the broad shape of the outcomes was good. People had found clearer ground. Resources had reached people who needed them. The work was quiet and real. I thought about the check I had written to Marcus for a tech consulting firm and then about this room and what it had grown from. The math of that exchange was not a simple loss. It was a redirection. $300,000 invested in the wrong direction had become, through the events of one complicated evening, the catalyst for something that was building toward a value no number could cleanly express. I was not naive enough to think pain always leads somewhere useful. Doesn't. But sometimes, when the people involved are willing to do the work, it can. And sometimes the most destructive thing a person intends becomes the opening through which something lasting grows. The new year arrived. Lily sent me a message at midnight on the 1st. Just 4 words. Thank you for everything. I sat up reading it in my bedroom with the city quiet outside, and the knowledge that the year ahead was unscheduled in the best way, full of the open space that comes after something difficult resolves. I wrote back 6 words. Thank you for being exactly you. We didn't need more than that. The long version had already been written in everything that had happened over the previous 8 months. The short version was enough. In January I started the novel outline. It was not about the wedding. It was something I had carried the bones of for years, a story about 3 women in different generations navigating the same city across different eras. I was not sure it would ever become a finished book. That wasn't entirely the point. The point was the morning hour I spent with it, the cup of coffee, the quiet desk, the feeling of making something that didn't yet have a function beyond existing. There is a particular freedom in making something for no audience. I had forgotten that freedom existed. Lily's organization reached a milestone in February. The 100th person served. She sent me a text with a number and a small understated note about what it meant. I looked at that number for a long time. 100 people who had found clearer ground because a groom with a microphone and a grievance had chosen a wedding reception as the right place to be contemptuous of his mother-in-law. The distance between that moment and this one was exactly the distance between what people intend and what they accidentally cause. He had not intended this. Neither had I. But here we were. I thought about Marcus occasionally. Not often and not with heat. Mostly I thought about him the way you think about weather conditions that changed your route, not fondly, not bitterly, just as a fact that produced a different path than the one you had planned. I did not know what his life looked like now. The investment repayments continued arriving on schedule. That was the last regular contact between us. I hoped he was doing the work on himself that the events of that night had made available to him if he chose it. I had no way of knowing whether he had chosen it. Spring came with a specific hopefulness of springs that follow difficult winters. Lily's organization had 3 workshops scheduled in April. She had a small board now, 3 people, all with relevant expertise and genuine commitment. She was working fewer hours at her day job in preparation for eventually transitioning to the organization full-time. She was doing it carefully, building the foundation thoroughly before she stepped away from the stability. Patient. Her own person. My painting class had moved through winter and into spring, and my work had improved in small, observable ways. The instructor told me I had a good eye for light, which I thought was a generous interpretation of my canvas, but I accepted it gratefully. I had learned that accepting a genuine compliment gracefully is its own form of respect for the person offering it. I had been teaching myself small things like this throughout the year. Receiving, resting, making things without a functional endpoint. Allowing the novel outline to stay an outline for now without pressuring it toward completion. In April, the regional magazine that had profiled me in the autumn ran a follow-up piece specifically about Lily's organization. The journalist who had interviewed me came back to talk to Lily and to Joanna and to 3 women who had consented to share their experiences as participants. The article was respectful and careful and communicated the specific nature of what the organization was addressing without sensationalizing it. Several significant donors reached out in the week after publication. Lily was selective. She took meetings with the ones whose values aligned. She declined politely the ones whose interests seemed more performative than practical. I was at my painting class the evening the article came out. I had turned off most notifications for the evening by habit. When I left the class and checked my phone in the car, there were many messages. I read through them with the windows down in the spring evening. The responses ranged from substantive to sentimental to a few from people who seemed to be watching for drama that had not appeared in quite the way they expected. I answered the substantive ones that evening. The sentimental ones deserved attention but not urgency. The drama watchers received nothing. Lily called after seeing the article live. "It's real now," she said. "It was always real," I replied. "It's publicly real now," she said, which was a different thing, and she was right. There was a version of the organization that existed for the people it served and the people who built it. And then there was the version that existed in the wider community awareness, which created different obligations and different opportunities. She was navigating that distinction thoughtfully. I told her so. She said she had learned it from watching me navigate it over the past year. That word watching stayed with me. Our children watch us long before we understand they are studying us. Lily had been observing me her entire life, noting how I carried difficulty, how I recovered, what I prioritized when things became hard. I had not always provided a perfect model. There had been years when fear made me smaller than I needed to be. But somewhere in the pattern she had found something useful. The stillness at the wedding table. The measured walk to the exit. The Tuesday morning attorney appointment. The painting class in winter. All of it studied and then applied in her own way. In May, Lily and I took the trip I had been planning since autumn. We went to a place neither of us had been before. A small coastal town with good food and long walks along the water and evenings that cooled early and invited sweaters. We rented a small house for a week. We walked in the mornings and cooked in the evenings and read in the afternoons, each in her own chair, in a comfortable parallel silence we had perfected over the year. We talked sometimes about everything and sometimes about nothing and sometimes not at all. All 3 versions were good. One evening we walked along the water at low tide, the ocean flat and silver in the fading light. Lily picked up a stone and turned it over in her hands. "A year ago," she said. "I know," I said. She threw the stone sideways and we watched it skip once, twice, a third time, and then enter the water quietly. "I keep thinking about who I would have been," she said, "if that night had gone differently, if he had given a normal speech. If I had stayed." I thought about that for a moment. "She would have been quieter," I said finally. "In the wrong way." Lily was quiet beside me. The water moved softly over the sand where we stood. "You were already becoming uncomfortable," I continued gently. "I saw it, even though you weren't saying it. The visit at Christmas. The way you deferred to his opinions in front of people. You were already making yourself smaller to fit the space he was giving you." She nodded slowly. "I knew," she said. "I just hadn't found the door yet." "He opened one for you," I said. Not kindly. But it opened. She smiled at the irony of that. We turned and walked back along the shore together, the town lights visible ahead of us in the early dark. The last evening of the trip we sat on the small porch of the rental house with wine and the sound of water in the background. Lily had her feet on the railing. I had a notebook in my lap with the novel outline open but unread. The evening was mild and complete. "I want to say something," Lily said. "Say it," I replied. "What you did that night," she said slowly. "Sitting still. Not reacting. Walking out with me. Everything after. The way you handled the money. The speech at the luncheon. All of it." You pause. "I want you to know it didn't look passive to me. It never looked passive." I looked at her. Her face in the porch light was open and direct. "It looked like someone who had decided what she was made of before the moment asked," she said. "And then the moment asked, and you already knew." I held that quietly for a moment. "I wasn't always that person," I said. "I know," she said. "That's what makes it more impressive, not less." We sat there as the dark came in fully and the stars became visible in a way they never were in the city. The notebook stayed closed. The wine was finished. The evening required nothing more from either of us. We flew home the next morning. The city received us with its usual noise and traffic and the particular quality of returning light that cities have, filtered and busy, nothing like the coastal air we had been breathing for a week. I went back to my consulting work, to my painting class, to the Tuesday morning hours with a novel outline that was slowly, almost without my noticing, becoming something more than an outline. Lily went back to her organization, to the workshops, to the growing quiet machinery of building something real. Summer arrived and brought its long evenings and the particular ease of a year that has found its rhythm after disruption. I had been thinking, in the weeks before a scheduled business community event, about what I wanted to say when I was given the floor. The event was an annual gathering I had attended for years. This year I had been asked to speak as part of a panel on leadership and difficult decisions. I spent several evenings with the notes I had been accumulating all year. Not quite a speech, more like a collection of honest observations I had been refining since the morning after the wedding. On the evening of the event, the room was full of people I had known professionally for years. There were newer faces too, people who had found their way into the community network through the magazine profile or through the organization or simply through the way stories travel. I sat at the panel table and listened to the other speakers first. They were interesting and thoughtful. When my turn came, I looked out at the room and felt, for the first time in a while, the pleasant weight of having something real to offer. I saw Lily in the third row. She had come without telling me she was going to. She looked calm and attentive in the way of someone who belongs in the room she is sitting in. Behind me, a screen displayed the name of her organization, one of the event's listed community partners. Several people in the audience had already noticed it. I could feel the small shift in the room's attention, the recognition of the story behind the story, the history assembled visibly in the same space. I waited a moment before speaking, the way you wait before something you want to say clearly. Then I began. "The most expensive lesson I learned this past year," I said, "didn't come from a boardroom or a business failure. It came from sitting still at a table covered in yellow roses while someone with a microphone tried to tell a room full of people what I was worth. The room was quiet. I had their full attention. The interesting thing about that moment," I continued, "was that it cost him the floor eventually. Not because I fought for it. Because I waited. I spoke about the structure of dignity. How it isn't constructed in moments of crisis but in the long ordinary years before the crisis arrives. How the practice of knowing your own worth has to happen privately and repetitively long before it is called upon publicly. How silence in a charged moment is not absence. It is a form of presence so complete it doesn't need volume. I talked about Lily without staging it as a tribute. I talked about her as an example of someone who had done something genuinely difficult with grace and conviction and then turned it into purpose. I talked about what $300,000 can become when the original investment fails and you refuse to let the loss be the end of the story. I talked about the 100 people who had found clearer ground through the organization my daughter had built from the wreckage of a wedding that was never really about flowers and cake. When I stopped speaking, the room was quiet for a long moment. Then the applause came. The kind that moves through a crowd unevenly, starting in one place and spreading outward. Lily stood up. Then a few others stood. Then most of the room. I looked at my daughter standing in the third row with her hands together, and the feeling inside my chest was not triumph and was not relief alone. It was something quieter and more permanent. The feeling of having moved through something large and come out the other side changed in ways that had been worth the change. The panel moderator gave me a moment before the next question. I used it to take a slow breath and look at the faces in the room. They were listening in the real way, the way that means something is landing where it needs to land. After the event, people gathered in the reception area. Lily found me near the window and stood beside me the way she had stood beside me at countless events over the years, familiar and easy. "You didn't tell me you were coming," I said. "I wanted to hear it without preparation," she said. "Did it land the way you hoped?" Yes. She considered this honestly. "Better," she said. "Because you weren't performing it. You were just saying it." The room moved around us with the gentle noise of people winding down an evening. Conversations and laughter and the clink of glasses. A woman approached us, tall with gray-streaked hair and a direct way of moving that I recognized as someone accustomed to making decisions. She introduced herself as the director of a regional foundation that funded community organizations. She had seen the profile in the magazine. She wanted to talk with Lily about a potential multi-year grant. Lily shook her hand with the steadiness of someone who had been preparing for exactly this kind of moment without knowing when it would arrive. They exchanged cards and agreed to meet the following week. When the director moved on, Lily exhaled slowly. "Multi-year grant," she said quietly. "Yes," I said. "Will you help me prepare for the meeting?" she asked. "Just the preparation," she clarified. "Not the meeting itself." "Of course," I said. That was the right request and the right distinction. We would prepare together and then she would go into the room as herself. That was the correct shape of the thing. The support that builds independence rather than replacing it. I had taken a long time to understand that shape. It was good to see her already knowing it. In the days that followed, something settled more fully in me. Not the settling of acceptance, which is the end of resisting. More the settling of arrival, which is the feeling of having come to a place you have been trying to reach. I had not started the year expecting transformation. I had started the year as a mother at her daughter's wedding, proud and present and quietly alert. The year had transformed itself around me and I had transformed inside it. The two processes had produced something worth examining. I finished the novel outline. It was longer than I expected and more alive than I had hoped. I sent it to a friend who worked in publishing, not asking for anything specific, just sharing the fact that it existed. She called the next day and asked to read the first chapter. That was enough for now. Not an arrival, just the next open door. I went to painting class on Tuesday. I made another small landscape that had improved in specific ways over the previous ones, the light more accurate, the edges more considered. The instructor said I was finding my voice in it. I liked that framing. Lily met with the foundation director. She called me afterward from her car. "It went well," she said. "How well?" "Yes. She wants to bring a proposal to their board for a 3-year commitment," she said. Her voice was the voice of someone trying to hold something carefully because it was still fragile and real. "Lily," I said. "I know," she said. "I know." We were quiet together on the phone for a moment, not filling the space because the space felt right as it was. Then she said she had to get home and I told her I loved her and she said it back and we said goodbye. A year after the wedding, I was sitting in my home office in the early evening, the city outside the window doing its dusk routine. I had my coffee and the novel outline open on my desk and a fresh painting drying on the counter in the kitchen. The phone was quiet. The evening was mine. I thought about the man who had stood at a microphone in a ballroom and called me an ugly loser in front of 300 people. I thought about what he had intended and what had actually happened. He had intended to diminish me. He had not. He had given my daughter the specific moment she needed to become fully herself. There was no gratitude in that thought. But there was clarity. The understanding that even the most contemptible actions can produce unintended consequences in the wrong direction for the person who initiated them. He had used my love for my daughter as a vulnerability. He had not understood that love of that depth is not a vulnerability. It is the most durable material there is. It bends without breaking, holds weight. It persists through the longest nights and the most public humiliations and the quiet, difficult mornings in a kitchen with 2 cups of coffee and a lot of truth to say. I stood up from my desk and walked to the window. The city below was the city it always was, indifferent and vast and full of its own 10,000 stories moving through the traffic and the lights. I had spent most of my adult life in this city building something, a career, a home, a daughter, a self that could withstand the weight of living. None of it had been easy and all of it had been worth it. Not because nothing bad had happened. Because everything that had happened had been navigable. Because I had always, eventually, found the yellow roses to focus on. The evening deepened. I went to the kitchen to pour another cup of coffee and stood at the counter looking at the new painting. It was of the coastal town, the silver water at low tide, a horizon that went on past the edge of the canvas. I had been trying to capture the light we had seen on the evening walk with Lily. I had not quite gotten it right yet. I would try again next week. That was the thing about making something, you kept returning to it until it was as close to true as your hands could get. I heard my phone light up on the desk. A message from Lily. 3 words and a small image. She had taken a photograph of the entrance to the organization's workspace, the new permanent location they had just moved into that week, the small clean sign with a name she had chosen, and the door propped open as if someone had just walked through. 3 words beneath the photo. We did this. I looked at the image for a long time. The open door. The sign in the light. My daughter on the other side of the phone, somewhere in the city, standing in the room she had built from the rubble of a terrible evening and a year of patient, careful work. I typed back 2 words. We did.